Welcome back to another episode of Vintage Egyptologist. Today I'm going to be talking about historical fiction. Now, this was one of my favorite genres of fiction when I was growing up, and I still love a good historical fiction novel. But what's really remarkable, this is just amazing, even though I've written a book about the topic and I know this so well, the ancient Egyptians had historical fiction. The year is 1560 BCE. This is what Egyptologists call part of the Second Intermediate Period, which is roughly 1650 to 1550. This is the time between the Middle Kingdom, where you have a powerful, centralized kingship, and the New Kingdom, where again, Upper and Lower Egypt are unified under a single pharaoh. However, in 1560, there is a dynasty ruling in the south. This is the 17th Theban dynasty, so its capital is ancient Waset. In the north, you have the 15th dynasty, who are a series of Hyksos kings. Now, Hyksos is a Greek term that comes from ancient Egyptian Heka Chasut. That means ruler of the foreign lands. So the 15th dynasty are kings that are not Egyptian. And for any ancient Egyptian to have part of the Nile Valley ruled by a foreign king is anathema. So the story that is set in this time period, so it was written around 1250 BCE, but set in 1560 BCE. And the modern title that we give it is The Quarrels of Apepi and Seqenenre. Apepi is a Hyksos king, often spelled out Apophis in modern histories, but this is really misleading because Apophis is also the Greek term that we tend to use for the chaos serpent Apep. So Apepi, the Hyksos king, and Apep, the chaos serpent, sounds really similar to us, but it's actually spelled with two different signs at the beginning in ancient Egyptian. So it doesn't seem like that's a comparison that they're making. Now, King Seqenenre is a king of the 17th dynasty. And the way this story begins is that Apepi and Seqenenre are having a quarrel, not in terms of a fully fledged military conflict, that is yet to come between the 17th and 15th dynasties, but instead they're having a battle by letter. So I'm going to read here from the translation that I published in 2013 in my book, Imagining the Past, Historical Fiction in New Kingdom Egypt. And this is how the story starts. Then it happened that the land of Egypt was in a state of pestilence, with no legitimate lord, living prosperous and healthy, as king at that time. At the same time, it happened that as for King Seqenenre, he was the sovereign of the southern city. So that's the reference to ancient Waset, Greek Thebes, modern Luxor. Pestilence was in the city of Re, that's a reference to Heliopolis, because of them, referencing here the Hyksos, while the ruler Apepi was in Hutwaret, and that was the capital of the 15th Hyksos dynasty. And the entire land was controlled for him, for Apepi, bearing their taxes, the north as well bearing all the good produce of the delta. So what this is telling us is that Apepi, the Hyksos king, is essentially in economic control of Egypt, even though Seqenenre is king in the south. Then King Apepi made Set as lord. This is Set, the god of chaos, the god who fights with Horus to be king of Egypt. And he, meaning Apepi, did not work for any other god who was in this entire land except Set, and he built a temple of fine workmanship for eternity beside the domain of King Apepi. And he appeared each day in order to make sacrifices, doing it daily for Set, while the officials carried wreaths. So what this is essentially saying is that King Apepi is not only not a legitimate king of Egypt, but he's committing a religious sin by offering only to the god Set, and doing so as is done in the temple of Re Horachti at Heliopolis. So he's only worshiping Set, and he's not worshiping him properly. Meanwhile, and this is where the action really starts, Apepi desired to send an offensive message to the king Seqenenre, the sovereign of the southern city. Now, after many days following this, and unfortunately, the text really breaks up here. So the next part of the story is that Apepi's message reaches Luxor. And it says that his messenger was taken into the presence of the sovereign of the southern city. So that's Seqenenre. Then one, King Seqenenre, said to Apepi's messenger, quote, "Why have you been sent to the southern city? Why have you reached me with these journeys?" Then the messenger said to him, "It is King Apepi who sends to you, saying, quote, expel the hippopotami from the swamp that is on the eastern waters of the city, because they," talking about the hippopotami, "do not allow that sleep come to me day or night, because their noise is in my ear." Then the sovereign of the southern city was surprised for a long moment, being unable to respond to the messenger of King Apepi. And I think we're a little surprised too, right? 500 miles separates Luxor from Avaris, Waset from Hutwaret. So how are hippopotami 500 miles away keeping Apepi awake? And this is really the crux of the story. So we know that Apepi worships Set to the exclusion of all other gods. And we know that he is in conflict with Seqenenre. But he sends this message complaining of the noisiness of the hippopotami. And what I think is going on here, because hippopotami can be a representation, an animal manifestation of the god Set, that even though Apepi, the foreign king, worships Set, and even though he thinks Set is on his side, Set, with these noisy hippopotami, is actually getting back at the foreign king. Now, it is unfortunate that the one papyrus copy we have of this story, Papyrus Sallier 1, which is in the British Museum, which was copied in year 10 of the reign of Merneptah by a scribe named Pentaweret, seems to have had other things on his mind by the time he gets to the end of the story. So it's rather broken up. And then it says that the sovereign of the southern city, so this is Seqenenre again, has his officials summoned, as well as every commander, and he repeated to them every communication about which King Apepi sent to him. And they were all together quiet for a long time, not knowing how to respond to him, good or bad. Then King Apepi sent. And that's it. The text breaks off, but the papyrus is not actually broken. Instead, what seems to happen is that Pentaweret has copied enough of the story that now he moves on to an instruction of letter writing. So I think what Pentaweret is doing is he's promoting scribes. He's saying that there are these two kings who are quarreling, but what's most important are the scribes that are writing the letters back and forth. The next part of the British Museum papyrus is a rather boring manual of letter writing. So I think Pentaweret copied this fascinating story, the quarrel of Apepi and Seqenenre, to get his scribal students interested in what's going to come next. So because we only have one copy of the story and it doesn't preserve the ending, we don't know what happens. We do not know whether in the story Apepi and Seqenenre actually have a pitched military conflict or who gains the upper hand. However, we do know historically what actually happened. Apepi continued to be king of the Hyksos until the reign of Kamoza, another 17th dynasty king. King Seqenenre of Thebes met a very different fate. We know from his mummy that was discovered in the Dir al-Bahri cachette of royal mummies that he died in battle. And we know that because there's a Hyksos battle axe shaped hole in his skull. as well as a number of other injuries. So in the end, Seqenenre died fighting the Hyksos, almost certainly King Apepi. But through the medium of historical fiction, the Egyptians were able to recast this complex time in their history as a narrative of victory and triumph, and ultimately the centrality of scribes and literacy in ancient Egypt. And if the readers of the story did not know a little bit about history, it simply wouldn't have been fun to read, just like historical fiction today. So now you've heard all that we have of the story of the Quarrels of Apepi and Seqenenre, one of the most important works of ancient Egyptian historical fiction. In future episodes, I'm going to introduce you to 3 additional stories. Next up is the capture of Joppa and ancient Egyptian soldiers hiding in baskets to capture the city. Thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe, and there are lots of notes below if you want to learn more about these stories.